Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel for part 2 of my demonstration of a turn of play of the Central Pacific Campaign 1943 to 1944. Now when we left, it was the end of the US part of the turn, of the October 1943 turn, and my bewildered US forces had found, despite the fact that they fought, pretty well in their invasion of Tarawa, they've been temporarily kicked off the island, and a brigade of Japanese infantry is still sitting there smugly pulling faces at us and generally probably hurling insults and challenges and generally having successfully wasted our time for a whole month of combat. I did check the rules again, and I'm afraid I was playing it absolutely right. If you don't clear the Japanese forces off a small island in a round of combat, you get chucked back onto your ship. So I don't know quite what that's supposed to represent, but it does have the same kind of delay. There is a benefit for the US forces in that during their counterattack phase, the Japanese on small islands will not counterattack you because you're not there to be counterattacked. So I guess there's an advantage of sorts there, but I'm still not quite seeing it. But anyway, on to the poor Japanese, because up to this point they've been fairly passive and they've just been sitting there while I've been dishing it out to them. So, what are they going to do? Well, the first thing that happens every Japanese turn is called the return phase. And in the return phase, naval units that sortied the previous turn are returned to the combined fleet bases in Japan. Now, there are no Japanese naval units out because it's the first turn of the game. The closest ones to me, and they have been pretty passive, are the standing naval forces at Truk Lagoon, but we shall see whether they get woken up for any counterattacks this turn. So as no Japanese ships are returning to port yet, we next get the Japanese random event phase. So I'm just going to get my Japanese equivalents of the US random event counters, and we have drawn naval. Ooh, let me see if the camera will focus. Naval on naval. So that's Japanese counterattacks against the US Navy specifically. So I will just put the counter off to one side. Now, what happens in a naval/naval attack is for each US force that moved, i.e., my fast carriers and my amphibious invasion, the Japanese player, or more accurately, the US player representing the Japanese. Sorry, I'll just check the rule book. Talk among yourselves. Okay, for each US force, the Japanese side rolls 2 dice and totals them, and then randomly picks that number of ships from the combined fleet box over here. And they appear in the same sea zone as the US forces and offer battle. Now, I'm not sure how I feel about this, but with my Nimitz hat on, this is actually great because, our new carriers, some of them are up and running. I've got a decent force, and the Japanese will be striking at what's pretty much the extremity of their defensive perimeter. If they want to give me a decisive battle, that is absolutely fine with me. So I'll deal with the threat to the carrier force first. Let's see what we get. Ooh, 8. Blimey. That's quite a strong naval force. Not as strong as ours, mind, but it's still strong. So I have just placed the combined fleet into yet another cup. This game is very cup intensive, by the way. Let me just show you. I've got the US and Japanese random events. I've got the US reinforcement cup. And of course the spare cup for our friends in the combined fleet. So I will just leave that there while I draw 8 ships. Okay, the combined fleet has sorted. Now, what have we got? We've got some carriers. There's Shokaku. We've got at least one. So, ooh, that old veteran has come out to play. This is going to be interesting. We also have the brand new carrier Taiho. And the Japanese equivalent of an escort carrier. I mean, things like Kaio and so similar, nowhere near as capable as their US contemporaries, but hey, it's a flight deck. They've also brought the Nagatos have come out to play. I mean, really, technically, it's just Nagato herself at this point, because I think in theory Mutsu should have already blown up with her magazine accident, but never mind, we'll say it's Nagato on her own. We also have a heavy cruiser force. Okay. Sorry. Trying to line these guys up neatly. 2 flotillas of destroyers, which I will attempt to put the right way up. And interestingly, a logistical and seaplane support vessel. All right, yeah, by all means, bring them to the party if you want. So, time for me to oppose them, just to achieve maximum intimidation. I am going to lay out my carriers in all their glorious awesomeness. Yep, bet you fellows are wishing you didn't come out now. I'll tell you what, let's keep the battleships separate. Just adds to the impressiveness of the whole ensemble. So there we go. That's what they've decided to pick a fight with. Let's see how this plays out. So as ever, we start with our initiative roll. Ooh, which the US very convincingly wins. And it's the anti-air round first. Now, again, the slightly confusing thing about this is that although so many ships here have an aerial combat rating, because there's no separate aircraft involved like these guys, nothing happens during that phase. So we next move to the anti-surface naval combat. Now this is where we look at the ratings at the bottom right-hand corners. So I am going to roll for my 5 big aircraft carriers first. And I need a 3 or less on 5 dice. So come on, boys, let's go sink some Jap carriers. Oh dear. I think the inexperience of our force is telling. Okay, we've got 1 naval hit on the Japanese so far. I'll record that. Let's see if our escort carriers do any better. They need a 2 or less, so the chances are a bit low this time. Oh dear, no. This is really not great. Okay. I've got my surface units as well. The problem is the Japanese can protect their other assets because they've got surface combat units. So they're just going to shuffle the precious transports to the back. So if I want to land any hits on their carriers or their logistical support vessels, I have to have enough ships to overspill their protective forces. Now, obviously, it's not a problem for aircraft, but if you're a surface ship coming in, it is problematic. Luckily for me, I have enough ships to line up against their surface forces, and that leaves a destroyer force that can snap at those guys. So I'm going to open fire for my 2 battleships. We need a 5 or less. Ooh, much better. Well done, the Navy. So there will be 2 hits scored on those chaps over there, and I haven't even started with the destroyers yet. Right, destroyers, 2 or less. Go get them. Okay. Slightly dubious. And the destroyer that has a crack at the carrier forces. Oh, no. Stop rolling high. Okay. So that's the end of the naval phase. Now I can choose my target. The only defense the Japanese could offer is protecting some of their core units from my surface fire. So I'm going to inflict the first hit. Now they have the same rating, so I'm going to demoralize them by knocking out the Shokaku, and that sends her to the Japanese refit box. As for these little guys, I think their cruisers and the Nagato are more dangerous, so I'm going to use the hits to remove those. So the heavy Japanese units go limping away. And that just leaves a very limited force to fight back now. So the aircraft carrier units, Taiho is going to gamely try and sink some carriers in return. Ooh, and her pilots know what they're doing. So hit scored on us. And the 2... Actually, you belong over there because technically you're a surface unit. The escort carrier is going to have a try. Fails miserably. And now the Japanese have the same problem I did with surface units. If they want to do any damage, they'll have to fight their way past these bad boys. So the destroyers are going to have a go first. They do very badly indeed. And for what good it's going to do, the seaplane tender's going to have a crack. Nope, looks like warrior spirit didn't cut it. So unfortunately for me, 1 Japanese hit did get through. I'm going to take it on the poor rugged Enterprise because, you know, I have a good feeling that she'll be back. She'll be fine. So she goes into the US refit box and her fate will be determined later. But that is the end of the combat round because there's no anti-submarine and there's no anti-ground work to be done here. So the Japanese ships will remain where they are until next turn's return phase. Now the beauty of this is I will get to counterattack them next turn, next US turn, and probably inflict further losses, which would be great. The only downside is I have to spend an action doing that. Now, what about the other naval force to the south? Because this being a proper Japanese naval offensive, they're going to do a 2-pronged attack. So let's see how many ships are coming. Only 5. This is a much smaller arm of the combined fleet, thank goodness. Hopefully no carriers among them because my air cover over Tarawa is very weak. So what have we got from the little pool of Japanese? Oh my great golly. Okay, it looks like the Battle of Leyte Gulf is happening a year earlier than it should have done. So the Southern Force, as I'm calling it, weirdly enough, I bet it's commanded by Nishimura, has got the slightly less capable carrier Hiyo, the scarily capable battleships of the Yamato class, more cruisers than I can shake a stick at. and a transport. Okay, interesting. Now this is going to be very tough indeed, because my transports are technically legitimate targets for that aircraft carrier. So I am going to have to spread these things out. Now the Japanese do have a targeting priority system, which I did follow in the previous battle, but I didn't mention it. So I'm just going to quickly lay my forces out. You're in Hawaii. Oh, look, there's brave Taffy 3 and the older US battleships. Hello, Oldendorf. I'm sure you're not there yet, but, you know, heavy cruisers. I'm so glad I attached a naval force to this. There. But just to show you what I mean, there is the Japanese targeting priority. And during the naval sides, they always will try to target carriers first. Okay, so what happens in the Battle off Tarawa? First of all, who wins the initiative or tactical advantage? Ah, once again, it's the United States. Thank goodness. Okay, so no anti-air, obviously, but we do get some anti-surface naval. So those carriers are going to roll and hopefully get a 2 or less. And they do it. Unsurprisingly, the carrier Hio is going to eat that bomb, or series of bombs, depending. Actually, let's get that. It's blocking my light. And now the 2 battleships are going to engage the Japanese battle line. So they have plenty of surface ships, but so do I. And just to add insult to injury, I'm going to detail... Oh, no, I'm not, because the Hio's already crippled and sinking. Yeah, we're just going to go for the Japanese battle line and try and drive them away. My transports can't fight, so they just have to cower. Battleships first, 4 or less is needed. Ooh, 2 more hits. Very nice. Heavy cruisers. No, not so good. And finally, the destroyers. Come on, guys. We can do this. 1 hit. All right. I mean, I'll take it. It's a decent amount of hits. So that's all we've been able to do to them this round. I mean, I say that's all. It's not bad. We've deprived them of the services of their carrier. And I am going to inflict... I've got 3 hits. I am basically going to cripple their surface forces. So the Yamato and the cruisers all go away. And that poor lonely transport cannot do anything. So that actually is the end of that naval round, because all of my guys have fired everything that can bear. And their guys, unfortunately for them, never really got much of a shot in. So, I mean, that pretty much went, actually, in a way, it went down a bit worse than Leyte Gulf did for them. So that's the end of the Japanese action phase. Now comes what's called their counterattack phase, where any land units on a large island may launch a counterattack against US forces that are on that island. But again, because they chased me off Tarawa so effectively, nothing happens. And then finally, we get the Japanese refit phase. Now, in the refit phase, you roll for every unit that is in the refit box to determine its fate. Now, I'll make a start and see how we go. So at the moment, there are 4... Oh, whoops. I have to just mess those up. So there are 4 ground units in the Japanese refit box. So I will roll for the first one, and I've rolled a 5, so it gets placed on the map as per the random island procedure. So the random island procedure, you roll 2 dice, add it together. I've just got an 11, which means one of these Japanese units is sent to Eniwetok to beef the garrison up there. What happens to the next one? A 1. A 1 is permanently eliminate, so that one goes away. And I don't know what its identity is. Number 3 is permanently eliminated as well. And the very last one, a 6. He gets placed back into circulation, or they rather. And so I've rolled a 7, which means they go to truck. Even less incentive for me to try invading the place. Look at that. What about the naval units? So they suffered very heavy losses in the operation that they just organized, but that doesn't necessarily mean these are permanently eliminated. So looking at the table for carriers, I'll roll for Shokaku first. I've rolled a 3, which is a permanent elimination. She didn't survive the operation. And now for poor old Hio, a 1, same thing. So the Imperial Navy has lost Shokaku and Hio. What happened to the battleships? Let's do Nagato first. A 6. She is back in the combined fleet box after a spell of repairs. She's ready for service again. The Yamato class only rolled a 1, which means they're permanently eliminated. Bad news for the Imperial Navy. And the 3 cruiser units, I'll roll together for them because they're all the same. A 1, 2, and a 3. All bad news for the Japanese because all 3 of those are permanently eliminated. So the Imperial Navy has suffered quite a disaster in that little operation. And with the refit phase, the Japanese turn is effectively over. So to zoom out and look back at the overall situation on the map, both sides, I would say, are in a bit of trouble. To win the game as the US, I have to do better than my historical counterpart in terms of islands seized and repurposed for the Allied cause. Now, looking at this, we've come to the end of October 1943, and I may not be in trouble yet, but in order to be on track with my historical counterparts, Tarawa absolutely has to fall next turn. And a problem I have is that I cannot launch an amphibious invasion until that Japanese naval presence is cleared. Never mind that it's only a miserable transport. I have to waste time sinking it and clearing a path, which will probably, if I'm very unlucky with whatever random event shit I draw, might mean that I only have 1 or 2 actions at best to be able to do this. So if things do not go well for the US, November 1943 will pass without much progress, if any, being made. So I have to be very aware of that. And in theory, I would have to plan very, very carefully. So yes, my forces have the satisfaction of generally stomping on the Japanese whenever they, wherever they go. But that's not of itself enough to guarantee me a victory. But I will leave that there because we have now played through an entire turn of this game. So as you can see, it actually can be over quite quickly because once you know what you're doing, the turns can actually pass quite quickly. It's the decision making that's the real agonizing part of all this. But I will leave that for now. And I look forward to seeing you all again in the next video where I'll be doing my sum up and my final thoughts, which will include a bit of commentary about some of the more curious rules in this game and the way that they're presented in the rule book. But anyway, I hope that you found that useful and enjoyable. And do take care, and I really look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Take care. Bye.